What is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into our latest Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Touched on it on Monday. We're going to have a CEO of Sanity Group, Finn Hänsel, come in just a moment, talk everything and anything that you need to know and what's next in Germany regarding their cannabis program. All things are going to be just fine. We're going to explain why and also talk about some of the numbers, which are astronomical as far as the overall growth, which I'm sure a lot of you already know and have been reading about. But before we get into that, special announcement to make. Our very own co-host, Anthony Varell, and his wife, they gave birth to a beautiful baby girl at 5 a.m. this morning. So if you can, leave some comments, leave some likes. Mr. Varell is now officially a dad. Mom and baby girl are doing great. 8 pounds, 9 ounces, baby. So let's congrats again to Anthony and his entire family. So hope all of you, I know a lot of you wanted an update pertaining to that. Just wanted to let you know that everything is all well and they couldn't be more happy. So saying that, let's jump into today's show and let's welcome in the CEO of Sanity Group, Finn Hänsel. First time to the podcast. Good to see you. How are things?
Things are very well right now. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that things are well because I do know there's been some uncertainty regarding, Germany over the last couple of days and people are trying to figure out what's next for the space. And what this new, government that was basically elected in and how their views are going to be, towards cannabis moving forward. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit just about who you are, who the company is. Some of the things that grab my attention is right now that you collaborate with over 2,000 pharmacies in Germany, over 5,000 physicians. And here's a big one, a 10% market share in the current German medical cannabis market, which is staggering to say the least. So how would you best describe? We see and we hear a lot of the numbers and the growth trajectory that's happened in the last 11 months in Germany. But in so many words, how would you best describe how much it's grown in Germany over the past year?
Well, I mean, like the new law from the old government was passed on the 1st of April, 2024. Yep. And from that, we've seen definitely a 3 to 4 times growth in patient numbers because German market is mostly a medical market. We've seen probably 10x or 9 to 10x increase in prescriptions. So just to give you an example, like January 2024, we had about 1.5 ton prescription of cannabis flower in Germany. It is assumed that in January 2025, we are around 10 tons. So the market is really dynamically growing right now. So it's probably becoming the
1 to 10 in 12 months. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You can understand why people are excited. I know there's a lot of stuff and headache going on here in North America, especially in America. A lot of uncertainty regarding rescheduling. Probably a lot of things that we could learn from Germany as to what's going on. But again, before we get into that, one thing I wanted to highlight too, and there's a few people that reached out to us, just the whole relationship between BAT, Organigram, and you and how it works, because I know you've received investments from both parties. So how does that whole arrangement work?
Yeah, so to be honest, first of all, we're an independent company. We were founded in 2018 by me and my co-founder. We got a lot of investments in from German tech VCs, but also family offices in the beginning. And then in 2022, BAT invested in us. They identified us as one of the companies they found most interesting in the European market. So completely independent from Organigram, they invested into us first. And then over time, the relationship fostered and BAT has a kind of like network across all the cannabis investments. And we got to know Organigram better over time. And then last year, Organigram invested in us separately from BAT. So we work with both of them very frequently. Organigram is one of our major suppliers. We work strategically on many topics with them. But again, BAT, us, and Organigram, we all work together very closely without belonging to each other, if you know what I mean.
Well, we've had Bina on a few times in the past, and I know she's talked about just, the overall excitement, waiting on approval for the EU GMP facility, which would be another big opportunity. Zach Higgins, Realtor, great to have you on. No, this is not a paid interview, but thanks for appreciate the comments of some of these people. But anyway, look, we look at their medical marijuana imports. They reach record levels in Q4 2024. As you said, imports almost up 4 times compared to a year ago. So where do you think that we are with regards to the upside potential from here? Because on average, stats have shown it's around 0.5% of the overall population that's currently prescribed for medical cannabis.
Yeah.
Industry average show between 2 to 3%. So you look at that, there's still some tremendous upside, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. We know that 10% of the Germans consume cannabis regularly. I mean, that is at least what the government numbers tell us. We know that most of them have a medical indication why they consume cannabis, also for recreational purposes. And if you think about, we have less than 1% of our population getting prescriptions for
Yeah.
cannabis right now. I could imagine at least to 3, 4, 5% in the areas of Florida or Australia. And that means we have like 8 million, or let's say 4 to 5 million minimum German patients consuming cannabis officially, like via the medical prescription soon. And I think that means that a company like us, even we can grow probably 4 to 5 times over the next 1 to 2 years.
Wow. So where does it stand right now? How many medical patients are currently registered in Germany? Do you know off the top of
So
your head?
unfortunately, you don't have official numbers, but our estimation thinks about 800,000, 700,000, 800,000, up from 250,000 last year. So 0.5, 0.6% of the population approximately is what's our best guess right now.
That's similar to Florida. Any people out there listening to this, I'm pretty sure it's 800 to 900,000 registered patients in Florida. If I'm incorrect on that, feel free to leave some comments, but that's on par. You're looking at a $2 billion market, similar to what Florida is producing. So you can understand, obviously, the interest level, but that is a huge growth.
Yeah, but with the difference that Germany has 80 million people, right? Or 84 million people. So it's a big market potentially
compared to the 21 or 22 in Florida. So
yeah,
when we look at what's in place when it comes to the legal framework, otherwise known as the country's Cannabis Act, or how some people call it CanG, which regulates and controls basically the handling of cannabis. And, really, I think in a lot of ways has created kind of a balanced approach for the overall industry in Germany. So can you explain on how these laws entail and how they're facilitated as far as the expansion of the medical cannabis market?
Yeah, I mean, in 2017, that was when the first medical cannabis law was launched in Germany. That was basically just allowing people to prescribe or to get cannabis prescribed. However, cannabis back in the days was still classified as a narcotic, which makes it extremely hard for doctors to prescribe cannabis.
Gotcha.
So no telemedicine possible. You had to visit a doctor personally. The doctor had to do a lot of administrative work to basically prescribe you cannabis. And what really changed, what you call the CanG or the cannabis law in Germany on the 1st of April last year, is that cannabis got, in the medical part of that law, reclassified as a non-narcotic.
Exactly.
And that meant for the medical cannabis prescriptions, telemedicine could work, virtual prescriptions. You could send it via the pharmacy, via mail to your house. You can deliver it with Uber Eats, which is currently happening in many German cities. So that was the real game changer. Yeah, within, for example, there's a company called Quick Green, 30 minutes delivery in Berlin, Hamburg. So actually, there's a lot of dynamic in the market right now. And the change of the law on the 1st of April, that was a big game changer for the medical. We also changed consumption cannabis or recreational cannabis laws. That is consumption in the public, home grow, cannabis clubs, and also how much cannabis you can carry with you on the street, which is around 100 grams. It was previously only 5 grams. So obviously that made it much easier for consumers as well. But the real game changer for the industry was obviously the medical part.
Yeah, for sure. When we look at some of the framework that is in place from a regulation standpoint, we need to get more countries speaking to each other. Have you actually ever had conversations with any lawmakers or political leaders out over in the US on what's actually happening in Germany?
No, not in the US. Like a lot of other European countries, I talked to a lot of French politicians. I talked to a lot of Australian politicians even. I talked to a lot of Swiss politicians because Switzerland is also very progressive in cannabis, but never to the US lawmakers, no.
Yeah, well, those are some staggering numbers. Like when you walk on the street, you just see the overall perception. Like, was this something that was due for quite some time once it went live April 1st? Or do you think just the overall education and perception just changed overnight because, like you said, it became legalized?
Well, the thing is, I think Germany has historically always been a high cannabis consumption country. So I think it is something that, at least in the cities, is widely accepted. So to answer your question, I think those people expected it to happen at some point. However, the Conservative Party that ruled Germany for the last 16 years before the left-wing coalition came in place last election, not the current election, but the election before, they were needed to change that law because the conservatives would have never done it by themselves.
Right.
And the last government we had before the new one that's coming was a left-wing government. It was liberals, Greens, and Social Democrats. And they together as a coalition published the cannabis law. And that was basically a major step that probably not even me expected that to happen so quickly.
Yeah. I can't believe how quickly it's been as far as like,
Yeah.
the growth. But you brought up telemedicine, and it's been a game changer to say the least, and some of the examples of the Uber Eats. But how would you best describe, I guess, the influence this method has had when it comes to the patient access and market growth for the country?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, telemedicine by now, I would say 60% of the prescriptions, 40% is still physical doctors, 60% is prescriptions by telemedicine. And obviously, especially in rural areas where you don't have doctors, very often doctors still have like problems prescribing cannabis because traditional doctors they don't voluntarily give you cannabis as the first option, and telemedicine platform can really close that gap that patients have when they think about to find a doctor which can prescribe them cannabis as an option. And that's the reason why telemedicine made it much easier for patients to really see how their indication can be like treated. It's very clear about what products are in the market. It's very clear about how you get to be screened as a patient before you get a prescription. So I
Right.
think telemedicine is doing a great way of making it more accessible in Germany.
So if you're dealing with over 5,000 physicians, how have they changed and viewed cannabis over the past year, knowing that it's easier to prescribe? Have you seen a lot of change in how they view it?
Yeah, I would say it's mixed.
Is it
There
still
are the
mixed?
doctors, there are the serious medical doctors who actually think that cannabis should only be prescribed under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
These doctors not necessarily like the new development because they think now everyone can cannabis so easily, it's not really medical anymore. But I would say the majority of doctors that we work with, they actually welcome those changes because they say like, look, cannabis was always a huge stigma. It's always like people didn't talk about it,
I
and
know.
now the law
I know.
change a year ago made it much more a topic that you talk about. There's less stigma around it, and I think many doctors and also pharmacists really like that development.
Yeah, stigma sounds like it's similar to what you guys battle, over
Yeah,
there as what we do here. But there's a lot I think we could learn in the U.S. Just based on one stroke of the pen and rescheduling cannabis, as far as creating
yeah,
jobs, providing research.
you
Obviously
should.
opening up the
Yeah,
doors for international market, or I should say capital. But yeah, maybe need to get you over to America and to speak to a few people. But I'm sure there's a lot we can learn. But one of the
yeah,
main reasons, and I think a lot of people wanted to find out, is the news that broke last week. It was announced that the Christian Democratic Union, otherwise known as the CDU, they won the election
yeah,
led by Friedrich Merz, who, if I'm correct, he's a former board member of BlackRock, correct?
yeah, correct.
Yeah. So based off of this news, there's, early glance, it's created some uncertainty when it comes to what's going to happen next for this German cannabis market, knowing that the CDU has expressed intentions to, I guess, review and potentially tighten regulations on the cannabis market. First up, do you see or do you think we'll see any changes based on the current model that's already in place? Like, what are the requirements to get something to pass in Germany?
So let's take one step back. So the law has passed last year in April, done by the old government. And as I mentioned, two pillars were part of that law, the
Correct.
medical and the consumption. And that together was called Pillar One. And then the retail stores would have been Pillar Two. The retail stores never came, and I think they will not come in an own law. However, what the CDU said during their election campaign, they said we want to restrict cannabis again. They were never really vocal about what exactly they want to restrict. They just said like we want to take the law back. But over the last 6 months, not only me but also my fellow cannabis CEOs in Germany that we work very closely with of other cannabis companies, we talked to a lot of CDU politicians, and what became very clear is they only talk about the consumption and recreational cannabis. So what they don't like is the
So these
public
are the pilot
consumption.
programs, right?
Well, not necessarily. I think it's for them more the clubs, the home grow, and the public consumption. Because
Okay.
what the conservatives really don't like is that you smell cannabis everywhere now. When you go through Berlin, everyone on the street is smoking it. So that is something that they don't really like. So that's something they want to take away. Similar to the high amount of cannabis you can carry with you, 100 grams right now. They think it's too much. Plus the home grow that they think is uncontrollable. If you grow cannabis plants at home. That's often something that they don't want to do anymore.
Right.
I think the potential of pilot programs might be even untouched by the CDU, but definitely the medical law will not be touched. So for us as a company operating under this framework of medical cannabis, nothing will change. You can even argue that it might even become better because in the future, cannabis consumers have less alternatives. So if they cannot grow at home anymore, and if they cannot go to cannabis clubs anymore to buy the cannabis there, they have to go via the medical supply chain. So for us, in a business perspective, it might be even better than before. But I'm also a cannabis activist, so obviously I'm all in for a full legalization. But business-wise, it could be even better for us than before.
So when we look at your legislation system set up in Germany, like, is it similar to like what Canada is, where it's a parliament system? Like, if you don't have majority, you need to form basically a coalition government versus, say, America, which is more of a presidential administration that's set up.
Yeah. So just to give you an example, the old government that was elected 4 years ago, 3 parties, Social Democrats, Liberals, and Greens, and only these 3 together had a majority in the parliament. So they had to form a coalition and they had to agree on compromises in all their election programs, and that formed the coalition contract. And now after the new election, you just mentioned that the CDU, the Conservative Party, won this election, and their program is not very cannabis friendly. However, they will need to coalesce with the Social Democrats or the Socialists as a junior partner in that coalition. So again, you will need to make compromises. And this SPD,
how do they view it? How do they view it as far as the socials?
Well, the socialists have been one of the driving forces behind the cannabis legalization. So obviously, I cannot imagine that the first thing they will do in the new government is take back the own law that they decided 2 years ago. So that's the reason why I think, even the CDU itself, if they would rule alone, I think they would not take anything back to the degree that it would hurt the business. Plus, they need to agree on a compromise with the Social Democrat Party, which is also very powerful. And that's the reason why I believe the outcome in terms of cannabis will be not that big. Plus, to be very honest, we have a lot of other challenges in Germany right now, from migration to economic policies to world conflicts all over the world. I think cannabis is the least of the problems.
Sounds like a lot of the same issues that a lot of Western countries are dealing with right now. And anytime a new administration comes in, it sounds like this is kind of put to the back burner. So saying that, you feel very confidently this Pillar 1 framework that's in place will stay intact regardless of who's in office, correct?
Yeah, fully correct.
It's encouraging to say the least, but you can understand why there's a lot of focus by a lot of companies, even in North America, that are spending a lot of time, like the Organigrams. Cureleaf is another that's focusing on this German market. But how much upside potential do you see over the next couple of years pertaining to the market itself? Because, does the trend continue at this pace? Because it's been astronomical, to say the least.
So I can tell you, every single month last year, everyone told us, next month the growth will be slower. Next month the growth will be slower. And it's not. All the telemedicine players are telling us they grow 40% month over month. All the physicians that we talk to tell us like they prescribe more cannabis than before. So far, we not really have seen a slowdown. However, what you see in the beginning, we had a shortage of product. And now suddenly a lot of product. You saw this in the numbers. Almost 40 tons, I think, were imported in Q4 last year. So I hope that we will not run into the same problem like, for example, Canada did a few years back, where you suddenly have an oversupply and the demand is not growing as fast. Then obviously the consequence will be like lower prices, which would not be good for anyone. And that's the reason why I hope that the growth of the demand will keep going and the supply will grow in a healthy relationship to that.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing in Canada now is a shortage actually in the country because of all the exporting that's going on, with Canadian LPs focused on that international
market. Going to Germany.
Say the least. One of the things actually I highlighted earlier this week was the amount of like healthcare and the costs have actually come down, is from my understanding correctly, since legalization happened. You want to touch on that maybe a little bit?
You mean the cost of prescription or the cost of the cannabis itself?
Cannabis itself, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say like the average price for cannabis as a prescription was around 11 to 12 euros per gram, similar to US dollars. So let's talk dollars. So $11 to $12 per gram. Now the average price for the patient is already around, I think, $8. And I think we'll probably go down to $7.50 around the mid of the year. So, but what you see, and that's very interesting, you see like really two different markets are developing. You have a premium market that is very much able to stick to higher prices around $14, $15, $16 per gram. So, for example, we just launched a new brand with Wiz Khalifa in the German market. So that constantly gets around like $15, $16 per gram. And people are paying for it. But then you have the new market opening up of really low price cannabis. And I think the average of both is bringing down the prices a bit. But I think both segments are actually developing well in the market right now.
How is that comparable price-wise? Because I assume that obviously you're always going to be battling an illicit market regardless of what country that you're in. But I was speaking to somebody on Monday, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is actually the regulated market cheaper than what the illicit market is charging?
Yeah, because there's one beauty that Germany can do that not many other countries can do. We can import from all over the world. So it means we can do something that not even the illicit market can do because it's too dangerous to import from all over the world. So most of the German illicit product is coming either from Germany directly or from the Netherlands or other countries around. And you know that they also need to pay for electricity. And electricity is very expensive in Europe. And if you import product from Colombia, for example, you are competing with a much lower price structure that's even lower than the German illicit market, for example. And that's the reason why the German illicit market is probably still around 8, 9, 10 euros per gram or $10 per gram.
Yeah.
And the cheapest product in the medical market are now around $4, $5 per gram. If they come from Colombia, even $3 per gram. So, and I think that's also coming back to your first question, the reason why the market is booming so much, because a lot of people are saying like, why would I buy on the illicit market if I can order online on a telemedicine platform, have it delivered by a driver within like 30 minutes? I can pay with PayPal. Plus, on top of that, it's good product that I know is clinically tested, and it's cheaper than the illicit market. So if you all have those arguments together, there's not much reason anymore to go to the illicit market. And that's the reason why I think it's also a reason why the market is booming right now in Germany very significantly.
Wow, lots that we need to learn. But I'd be curious to know what kind of influence has Germany's, I guess, framework had on the EU and other countries? Like how many, like you mentioned, you're having some conversations with politicians from France. Like how closely are other countries, neighboring countries watching this? And what's the, I guess, overall level of interest about implementing their own cannabis program within their countries?
Yeah, I mean, there's in the European Union a so-called Group of Nine. The Group of Nine are 9 countries that are interested in legalizing. So that has been Germany, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands,
Poland.
And a few other countries.
Yeah.
Poland, yeah, as well, exactly. And the problem is to legalize recreationally right now, it's very difficult under EU law. And that's the reason why you need to change the EU law first before you can do a full-wide recreation legalization. So all the markets that I know, for example, Czech Republic, Poland, they all follow the German example on how to regulate medical cannabis. And to a certain degree, that means that it gets much easier to get medical cannabis. For example, Czech Republic is doing a law change, I think in a few months from now, where the access to medical cannabis is much easier than it is right now. Poland has already done it. We know for the first time in France, there are some movements. France is historically very conservative on cannabis, where it goes into the right direction. Switzerland is fully legalizing. It's not part of the EU, but it's a neighbor country. It's fully legalizing in 2026. The Netherlands are doing the pilot programs of testing supply legally produced. So I think Europe is, as always, a bit slower than other jurisdictions. But I think everything in Europe is going into the same direction right now, that cannabis is rather becoming a bigger topic than a smaller topic over the next 5 to 10 years.
As I said earlier, I think more countries do need to be talking with each other. I know a group that you work with closely, the Artemis group, that basically they're out of London, England. They're going to be hosting a summit next month in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, exactly.
And be curious to see how much attention it gets from members from Washington. But it's a great model in place. And knowing the current sentiment in the cannabis space, it's been challenging here recently, but it's really good to see as to what's happening overseas and the growth trajectory that's taking place, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, what I always tell German politicians, even if they're conservative, you have 9 million German consumers. I mean, it's not about wanting more people to consume. It's about bringing those 9 million consumers in a regulated framework.
Yeah.
What can also, from a conservative perspective, be bad about it? Nothing. So I think it's a bit of like fear about, oh, cannabis is a drug, but I think the future will show that it's better to regulate than to accept the illicit market forever. And I think more and more European countries have that mindset, and if we can share that with the Americans and the other jurisdictions who think about legalizing, I think the better it is.
It's a generational thing, regardless of what country
Yeah,
you're in.
100%.
It's reality.
If you look at surveys in Germany, if people are against or for a legalization, it's a pure generation topic.
Yeah.
Like under 50, you have 70, 80% in favor. And if you're looking at age groups over 60, it's like the acceptance is less than 10%. So it's really like extreme how age plays a role here.
It does. All right. So the big takeaway here is that you still feel very confidently that everything that's in place in Germany will probably stay intact, regardless of what the election results were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cats
very positive, very bullish.
Yeah, we even touch on just the insurance that's being provided. And that's obviously got to be a big thing, too, for Germans, being reimbursed. But there's a lot, I think, as I keep saying, America that can learn from this. But hopefully we get a lot more attention fixated on that as to what's happening in Germany at this summit next month. But listen, really appreciate you checking in here today. This has been very informative, and look forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. next month.
Perfect. It was a pleasure seeing you, Jed.
All right. Thanks, Finn. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Take care. Well, that was interesting, was it not, people? So all this nervousness and speculation about what's going to come next in Germany, I think that's a great takeaway. But there's some, I just can't believe the stats that's coming out of Germany right now. Like, I know there was growth, but that is tremendous growth, to say the least. You can understand why more and more companies are really focused on that international market, more specifically Germany. But the amount of tons in 12 months, 1 to 10 tons, that's incredible. But all right, that wraps up our first featured segment. Now time for our weekly segment, Psychedelic Spotlight, presented here by Advisor Shares and their ETF P-Cell. Arns, let's roll. Back here on Trade to Black here on a Wednesday afternoon. Time for our weekly segment, Psychedelic Market Minute. And now we're going to bring in, actually, she's a special advocacy advisor from the National Psychedelics Association. First time to the podcast, Catherine Tucker. Great to meet you. How are things?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know we were touching a little bit offline before we actually went live here, but, a lot of your focus right now is advocacy towards psilocybin, which is still classified under Schedule I drug in the U.S. There's been some optimism pertaining to the overall psychedelic space since RFK was appointed as head of the HHS, and maybe there's some change that could take place. But before we even discuss any of that stuff or even get to that, tell me more about who you are, and I guess what's you're advocating for when it comes to psilocybin.
Yeah, thanks so much. I have spent 35 years in advocacy to protect and expand the rights of dying patients. And so my interest in psilocybin really came from the groundbreaking studies coming out in modern era research showing that even a single guided psilocybin session could alleviate anxiety and depression of patients in the face of death, patients dying of cancer, for example. And so those studies really motivated me to get involved, to find a way to advance access to psilocybin-assisted therapy for that population. And I've spent the last 4 or 5 years very much focused on that task. And it's involved a couple of different efforts. One has been to use state and federal right to try laws, which are laws recognizing that dying people don't have the time to wait for new drug approval to make its way to completion, and that population should have access to investigational drugs if they've completed a phase 1 trial. So we've been engaging that work. And then at the same time, we also initiated the first ever petition to reschedule psilocybin off of Schedule 1. And we're really excited about seeing that move forward and are eager to see therapeutic access available for patients with advanced and life-threatening illness.
So your advocacy group that you're involved in is called Right to Try. Are you based in Washington?
I'm sorry, it's not called Right to Try. The statutes are called Right to Try. The group that I'm with is called the National Psychedelics Association, and I am the director of advocacy for that group. It does have a Washington, D.C. base. It has a base also in Oregon, which, as you know, was the first state to create a legal state program for accessing psilocybin. And I had actually worked to champion the Oregon measure, and in that work became concerned about the lack of federal safe harbor, because these state laws can only change state law and the federal prohibition remains. And so I've really turned my attention to creating federal safe harbor.
Something that we all are too familiar with here in the cannabis industry. The federal level and state level are like the left hand is not speaking to the right hand. But yeah, we do know a few friends of ours. Actually, our guest on last week is former NHL hockey player Dan Carcillo, which I'm sure you're aware of who he is, and his new retreat that basically he has opened up in Oregon. But what do you think right now is the biggest misconception that you find about, psilocybin? Like, are you speaking with lawmakers, and what's their first impression, like, I guess, when you're speaking to whomever it is that pertains to it? Like, what is the biggest misconception about it? Can you hear me?
Well, I mean, I think lawmakers are eager. Yeah, I think lawmakers are eager to see additional tools for mental health challenges. So I think, our biggest obstacle really has been at the DEA. And I am hopeful that the tenacious advocacy we've been engaging is finally moving that agency forward. And we will look forward to working closely with that agency to get this rescheduling petition moving with some momentum. And I'm really hoping that, as you know, psilocybin has twice been granted breakthrough therapy designation. And there was an issuance of a draft guidance from the FDA about psychedelics. And I'm hoping that the combination of that familiarity within FDA will enable that agency, in conjunction with HHS, to act quickly on this rescheduling as it comes to their attention.
Have you paid much attention on the political front? Obviously, with RFK being head of the HHS now and his support for psychedelics in the last 2 months, did you come across that? Do you have much intel pertaining to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all tea leaves. Certainly, there are these public comments that people are taking a lot of attention. I think also, though, anyone in this administration obviously is subordinate to the president. And the president has had a warm embrace of Project 2025, which is very hostile to drug use. And I think it's very hard to know where this all ends up. But I'm hoping that the debacle with cannabis and the extreme slowness and controversy and drama in the cannabis rescheduling arena has maybe been a lesson that will cause the agencies, DEA, FDA, HHS, to try to streamline what happens with this psilocybin rescheduling petition, particularly because there are so many clinical trials showing remarkable efficacy, lack of adverse events, and the fact that there's a population of dying, suffering people across the country who could get relief. And I think most people are moved by that and want to see that population of patients relieved of suffering.
Yeah, well, I think there was, Daniel told us last week, I forget how many current trials are going on right now related to psilocybin. I think there's like 180 is what he told me. But you'd think with the angle, and something I have heard Donald Trump say, is that we need to have better access to better medicine for military veterans, which is something that obviously near and dear to his heart. But it'd be interesting to see how that develops.
Well, and same too. Yeah, I mean, really, when we think about dying patients, we can also think that in that population are people at risk of suicide. People with life-threatening conditions include both those, for example, with terminal cancer, but also with PTSD so severe that they might take their own life. And so we really want to get this drug that is so efficacious in helping people kind of reset how they think about their life and break out of patterns of thought, get this medicine and therapy for use with the patients, with their clinicians. We did see, for example, in our psilocybin rescheduling litigation, we had to take the DEA to court. We filed the petition. The DEA denied it. We took the agency to court, and we won a federal lawsuit decided by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And that led to a remand, which is requiring the agency to move that petition forward. But in the course of that litigation, we did see robust participation by stakeholders, including all of the veteran advocacy groups. The Veteran Mental Health Coalition came in to say, this is important for our community, and it's reprehensible that veterans have to leave this country and go to places abroad in order to get therapy and medicine that will enable them to return to high functioning status. So all of those stakeholders are very supportive of this rescheduling.
Have you spoken to Matthew Wiz Buckley, a guest that we've had a couple of times, but he's alluded to that a number of times, right?
Yeah, I don't know him. I know you've had my colleague Shane Pennington on here as something of a regular, and Shane is on our team with this rescheduling effort. And as you know, and perhaps you've also had Matt Zorn. They're also, Matt and Shane are both on this effort, and they're really tenacious and very successful in their efforts to hold DEA to proper conduct. And, I am aware of some of the drama in the cannabis rescheduling where Matt and Shane got some blowback around pulling the curtain back on DEA's conduct. But I think that was really important to do. And we have to look to we have to look to these agencies to engage in proper conduct when they handle these matters.
One of our viewers, great question. It's from Gretchen Gailey. She writes, what was your impression of the DEA? Why do you think they didn't even entertain a rescheduling request for psilocybin? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the agency appears to have kind of a knee-jerk reaction that anything on Schedule 1 should stay on Schedule 1. And, we have seen leading researchers point out the absurdity of psilocybin status on Schedule 1. Matthew Johnson, for example, at Johns Hopkins, has pointed out the absurdity of that and written some of the best clinical literature about that. But really, we have had to fight tooth and nail to make sure. And let's remember, the DEA is a law enforcement agency. It does not have medical and scientific expertise. It is required to send a petition for rescheduling over to HHS and FDA for medical and scientific evaluation, because they're the agencies that have that expertise. And so now finally, this is underway, as it should have been. And it's kind of a shame that we've had to fight so hard to compel the agency to do as it ought do. But here we are, and we're glad to be here.
We're waking up, aren't we?
Yes, yes. Yes. Yeah. And, we're certainly going to look forward to seeing smoother sailing forward from here.
Yeah. I have to ask, how do you respond to concerns from regulators or the medical community about the safety and, I guess, efficacy of psilocybin assisted therapy for terminally ill patients? Because I'm sure that's a question that gets brought up from time to again.
Yeah, well, there have been no adverse results reported in any of the clinical trials with this population. And, so hence my client, Dr. Sunil Agarwal, who's been in leadership as a very expert palliative care physician, wanting to bring this drug into therapeutic use with his dying cancer patients. The clinicians and the researchers know adverse events are not occurring, but tremendously beneficial effects are occurring. And, within the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine, there is a cohort of those expert clinicians eager to start educating their peers about therapeutic use and for that use to be possible. But we've got to get out of the Schedule 1 designation, and that's where our attention is focused now. And I should say, for those advocates of state measures, as in Oregon, one of the difficult realities is because the federal prohibition is in place, clinicians who might want to be involved with psilocybin services with their terminally ill patients can't participate. And so the patients are going to facilitators who need only hold a high school diploma and a module of training from the OHA. They're not highly trained hospice and palliative care clinicians. And for that population, that's probably the clinician you want.
Why is it set up that way, where they're not able to do that?
Well, you know, Oregon operates in violation of federal law. And so a physician cannot participate because they not only put their liberty at risk, but their DEA registration. And so physicians are essentially shut out of participating.
What do you think ultimately, like what schedule would you like to see psilocybin be?
Well, this will be a really interesting discussion, I think, if a notice of proposed rulemaking does issue with regard to psilocybin rescheduling. Because we are the advocates in this petition, we actually had petitioned for movement from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, which includes medical use with restrictions. Schedule 2 is a restricted schedule. Now, we made the choice to ask for Schedule 2 because it's the smallest bite at the apple, if you will. But if the rulemaking proceedings get underway and a comment period opens, everyone who has an opinion about which schedule it properly belongs on will have their day to express and advocate those views. Right. And I know there's a wide range of view on that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Do you see psilocybin being rescheduled before cannabis? Again, we don't even know if either one would be, but if one were to be rescheduled, how do you think it's viewed? And do you think psilocybin, I guess, could be rescheduled before cannabis?
I certainly think it can be, and I certainly hope it will be. And I think the differences are fairly obvious. I mean, there has been a tremendous amount of rigorous clinical trial with psilocybin. And those are rigorous and peer-reviewed and quite standardized results, et cetera. The things that scientific and medical evaluators like to see in new drug evaluation. So I think psilocybin is much further down that road than cannabis. I think also the 2 breakthrough therapy designations, let's remember, those are not issued unless the FDA has reason to believe that the investigational drug has benefit beyond already approved drugs in some important respect. So we have 2 of those for psilocybin. So I like to think that there's considerable knowledge and understanding within FDA of the benefit of this drug, and that very soon we'll be seeing a formal FDA HHS medical and scientific evaluation to that effect with a rescheduling recommendation.
Well, you hope common sense comes in play, because I know in cannabis, there's a 255-page redacted for the HHS that talks about the medical benefits. And at the same time, too, like you said, there's a number of trials, and it all comes down to data. But the data that's actually been produced with psilocybin, among other psychedelic compounds, has been staggering, to say the least. And it's this stigma. But, you know, do you think, though, as much as I talked about, do you think psilocybin gets rescheduled before cannabis? If cannabis were to be rescheduled, do you think that would pave the way for other like situations like yourself? Like it would be a good thing overall, yes, but how much of an impact it would have for lawmakers to look at things like psilocybin as well?
I think cannabis sits in its own category. I really don't practice in that domain, but I am aware that it's more than a 50-year battle to try to reschedule. And, you know, none of us will be here in another 50 years, but we are sailing along in contrast, in comparison with psilocybin. So I see them as very different. I don't think there is as much stigma. I think there are really great studies that support rescheduling, and I hope we'll sail forward now. And, you know, the thing is that coming from my career spent in the arena of improving care for dying patients, what psilocybin represents is filling a noted gap in the palliative care toolbox. And that is, we've done tremendous strides in recent decades to improve pain and symptom management and improve the dying experience. The
Right.
tool that's been missing is one for non-physical suffering. And that's what psilocybin represents. And that's why there's so much excitement in the clinical community and conferences going on all around the country with the hospice and palliative care professional community getting ready to bring this tool to the bedside across the country.
That's something, huh? How much support are you seeing? Because I know there's a lot of conferences that do talk about this, but for those that have never attended, like how much support are you receiving?
Well, I mean, if you're asking, I do appreciate the question in the sense that you may have sensed that this work that I've alluded to has been really time consuming and laborious, and it has been. And we are funded entirely through philanthropy. So if there are any philanthropists that listen to your program, or even any in the industry that are looking forward to seeing psilocybin come to market for commercial reasons, please support this work, because certainly the dying patients aren't funding it and the doctors aren't funding it, and it is being funded by leaders in the philanthropic community, and it's fallen on too few shoulders.
What's the best way for contact information? Logging on to the National Psychedelic Association?
Or reach out to me, either or. But yes, I like to say, you know, no support is too large or too small, but we're headed into a really intensive period now to hold the DEA to moving this petition forward properly on remand. And we really need to be prepared to do everything to support that effort.
Well, it's an important one, that's for sure. But yeah, all eyes, I guess, on this industry right now. A couple of emerging industries. We cover both cannabis and psychedelics. I'll make sure that I leave the cannabis questions to Shane Pennington in the future, and psilocybin, obviously, to you. But, you know, I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's badly needed. There needs to be change. Human sense needs to start coming to play, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, it could sail along. There's no reason why, with an administration that has some leadership supportive and aware of the impact of these investigational drugs, that it couldn't sail along. And that could be a real bright spot in this administration. So let's remain hopeful.
Yeah. Catherine,
and stay hard at work.
Hard at work. If it was easy, they wouldn't need you, but that's all part of the process. But that's what makes it worth it. But listen, appreciate you logging on here for the first time. Anybody that has any comments or wants to reach out to Catherine, let me know, or at the same time to reach out to Catherine directly. What's your email address and contact information?
Just my first name, Catherine, spelled as you see it on the screen, at yournpa, yournpa.org.
Great. Catherine, great work. And let's keep in touch, okay?
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Catherine. That is Psychedelic Market Minute presented by Advisor Shares, ETF PSIL, which has actually had the last couple of weeks, decent run. But hope you guys all found that informative. But yeah, in addition to cannabis, psilocybin needs to be rescheduled too. I was looking at the corner of my eye during the interview, and somebody actually posted that, yes, GTI's earnings are out. How were they, everybody? I think I heard somebody say it was good. Any numbers right now that you could quickly share? Guap and I will actually break it down a little bit later. Guap, you got any numbers right now? If not, no worries. Next steps, we'll have a full recap of the latest earnings. Irish posted them earlier. I want to post them again. I'm trying to think of how far up that comment was, but we'll get a full recap of earnings from GTI and Trulieve actually pre-market tomorrow morning. So we'll have that. All right. Green Thumb net income, 13 million or 4 cents per diluted per share. Revenue, 294 million. Year end, 1.1 billion revenue. Gap, 73 million, 30 cents per diluted share. All right. So that 294 million, what was that up from previous quarter or previous year? Anyway, we'll have here we go. Lots of decent numbers. Okay. Quick reminder, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., Kim Rivers is going to come on, CEO of Trulieve. So their earnings are coming out pre-market tomorrow. Some of the things I'm going to discuss is latest numbers. Some of the other things, tax liabilities. Do they plan to pay down some of the debt? Do they plan to do a share buyback? Some important questions I think a lot of you want to know. I'm then going to segue into the Florida landscape, see what's going on there. Obviously, with Amendment 3 not passing, what is she seeing from that? Still a quick reminder to mention and be reminded that it's still a $2 billion medical market as well. The political landscape, obviously, with DeSantis' term up in 2028. Does she have any kind of relationship with Byron Donalds, who wants to be the new governor of Florida? And then finally, we'll segue into Washington and what she's seeing and hearing. Obviously, she was in Washington the weekend that President Trump was sworn in. What was some of the dialogue she received? And is she having ongoing conversations with regards to rescheduling of cannabis? And if so, what she's hearing. So that's going to be everything we touch on tomorrow at 11 a.m. So mark it in your calendar. Make sure to log back here tomorrow at 11 with myself and CEO Kim Rivers. All right. I think that wraps up for today. What'd you guys all think of the first interview with Finn? Pretty staggering, to say the least, with regards to some of those numbers that Germany's producing. Going through a few comments here. I think that's going to wrap up things for today. Anyway, thought it was a great show today. Finn was phenomenal at trying to explain what the, I guess, political framework and how it's all basically created in Germany. But again, I guess the big takeaway is that don't get alarmed. It looks like everything's going to remain status quo in Germany. And man, if it does, 84 million people and as much as 250 to almost 800,000 medical patients grown in just 12 months. That's staggering, to say the least. So where this could go, knowing that they only target 0.5% of the entire country's population that's prescribed with medical cannabis right now, you can understand why a lot of Canadian LPs, along with the companies like Curaleaf, are fixated on the German market. I guess we'll see you all here tomorrow, back here at Thursday at 11 a.m. with Kim Rivers. Don't forget to scan that QR code and become a newsletter subscriber. Our Baked In newsletter subscriber delivered to your inbox Monday through Fridays at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Again, we'll have a full recap of the latest earnings and what this means and why you should care. And as well, like I said, we'll be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.